The story began with a beautiful sunrise in a big city. However, one young man had already been on his feet for a long time, working tirelessly. His day always started far too early. He carefully cleaned his home, as cleanliness, in his opinion, was extremely important. Very soon, the entire room was supposed to be completely clean, with only the last few centimeters of dirt remaining. Suddenly, the man sat down on the floor, put aside his rag, and relaxed. A faint smile appeared on his face, as it became clear that he had finished and everything had finally been cleaned properly. Still, he continued to sit on the floor, enjoying the order he had created with his own hands. He looked around the room once more and again praised himself for the cleanliness of his home. Moreover, he had washed the floor 3 times and checked everything thoroughly, so it was time to finish. Eventually, he truly decided to end the cleaning and began gathering his rags from the floor. After that, he threw them into the sink and decided to wash them. Admiring himself, he kept humming and even dancing slightly. However, the man kept staring at an object behind him that he could see in the mirror. In a bathtub filled with blood lay the bodies of dead people. They were tied up, their mouths taped shut, and at that very moment, the man was about to wash them. There was no time to hesitate, so he immediately began doing his dirty work. Meanwhile, 11 hours had passed, and the apartment was already filled with police officers and forensic experts. An unknown young man, who most likely had some connection to the crime, entered the apartment. His arrival seemed like a great relief, as the others were glad to see him. At this stage, it was already known that the incident had been reported by the daughter of one of the victims. Moreover, when people entered the apartment, the bodies were completely clean, just like the entire house. From this, it could be concluded that the criminal had stayed in the house for a very long time, since he managed to clean everything, and even had the opportunity to do so. What had happened resembled similar crimes in Chunoldong and Sinpyeong, as the method of murder was the same, and the distance between the cities was not great. Additionally, there was one common detail: the clean bodies and crime scenes, which led to the conclusion that the killer was the same person. Therefore, the men began thinking about what to do next. It was crucial to come up with a logical plan at that stage to find the killer and protect future victims. Such an idea came to one of the men when he remembered that surveillance cameras covered 3 districts and were located near the crime scene, making it possible to identify people involved. Meanwhile, the unknown man was behind the wheel, driving far too fast. He was listening to the radio, which was broadcasting urgent news about the murders in Chuholdong, Sinpyeong, and Jungjung. It was clear that the crimes committed there were so brutal and strange that they shocked everyone. Moreover, it was established that the perpetrator acted alone, and an investigation had begun. In addition, a close-up photograph of the criminal was published, and anyone who found him and handed him over to the police was promised a huge reward of 10 million won. The police also promised to do everything possible to catch him as quickly as they could. Meanwhile, the unknown man arrived at his planned destination and stretched his muscles beside his car. When he finished, he took out cigarettes and was about to light one. The man was surprisingly calm, as he was hiding a terrible secret. Suddenly, he climbed back into his car. He took the car out of gear, allowing it to roll calmly down the hill. He then calmly watched as his car rolled toward the cliff and would soon be destroyed forever. It seemed that this act was fully justified and that he had prepared for it. After all, it was the only way to cover up the traces of the crime and avoid pursuit. The car began to sink into the water. It became clear that the man was not an ordinary tourist and had something to hide. After all, an ordinary person would never take such a step or destroy their own car so easily. The young man looked at the settlement on the opposite bank of the river, at the empty streets and the many ruined and abandoned houses. He came to the conclusion that nothing had changed in that place and everything remained as it had been for a long time. Noticing another interesting detail, he reached an astonishing conclusion. The sacred tree that had stood in the settlement for many years had been cut down. The person who destroyed that sacred symbol seemed not to understand what they had done. Such an act required tremendous effort, as the tree had been protected by the entire village and the shrine. While reflecting on the fate of the sacred tree and the settlement, the young man did not notice a strange man standing behind him. The man began questioning the young man about who he was and what he was doing in the settlement at such a time. When the young man did not respond and only stared silently into his eyes, the man grew angry and raised his voice. Suddenly, the young man turned around and stopped in front of the villager. He asked whether the man was a resident of the settlement and how he had managed to find him. Suddenly, the man began screaming uncontrollably. His eyes filled with blood, and it seemed he was ready to kill the young man who had invaded his territory. However, this did not unsettle the hero. He remained calm and silently watched the old man rage. Suddenly, he heard the voice of a little girl running toward them. It became clear that she was the daughter of the enraged man, and she immediately began apologizing for his behavior. It was obvious that her father was not fully sane, and at that moment she was trying to take him away and feed him. And it worked. Hearing about food, the man immediately calmed down, as if nothing had happened. The girl also wanted to speak with the young man and asked her father to wait for her. She immediately began apologizing again for her father's behavior, knowing that he might have frightened the stranger. However, the young man denied everything and reassured her that everything was fine and that he was not offended. The woman noticed his backpack and assumed that he was a traveler. But the young man replied that he had recently moved to the area and was planning to settle in the village very soon. His words once again attracted the attention of the sick man. The girl also looked at him with surprise. She could not understand how someone could move with only one bag, as it was obvious that much more was needed. To divert attention from himself, the man began insisting that he was the grandson of one of the village residents, while the girl continued bombarding him with questions. Therefore, the young man told her about his grandmother named Kim Jeon's-ja. However, judging by the girl's reaction, it was clear that she had never heard that name before, and immediately began thinking, trying to remember. Suddenly, she realized in horror that the woman had been dead for 3 years. Looking at the young man's face, she saw that he immediately became sad. He tried to pretend that he knew nothing about her death, and it seemed he succeeded. However, unexpectedly, the young man smiled. This frightened the girl greatly, especially when he said that he was just joking. She could not understand how someone could joke like that without feeling guilt or shame. Moreover, she clearly remembered the woman's face and was certain that she had not seen the unknown young man at the funeral. Therefore, she had perfectly logical doubts that the young man might be an imposter who had never known Kim Jeon's-ja and certainly had never been her grandson. But the young man began wriggling out again and said that he truly had not attended the funeral. He also seemed angry at the girl, believing that such questions should not have been asked. The girl was angry as well, unable to understand what could have been more important than the funeral of a close relative. For her, it was extremely important to learn the real reason, since the stranger intended to live in her house. Suddenly, the young man burst out laughing loudly. The girl in turn was shocked by his behavior. She became upset, as she saw nothing funny in her words. Furthermore, the young man believed that he was not the only one who had not attended the funeral. He spoke of certain reasons and assured her that the elders of the village could confirm his words. Suddenly, a shout from the old man was heard behind the girl. He showed her a huge snake that he was holding in his hands, which he had just caught in the grass. The snake tried to break free, violently twisting in his grip. Meanwhile, the young man was preparing to leave the father and his daughter behind. He left behind only a pile of unanswered questions. The girl tried to remember his grandmother, analyzing every word he had said, because the young man was truly very strange. Meanwhile, the young man tried to find his grandmother's spare key. He was shocked, as it was not in the usual place where it should have been. However, after several attempts, he finally managed to find it. His grandmother had hidden the key in the most remote spot so that no one could reach it. Still, having found the key, the man tried to enter his grandmother's house. Opening the door, he saw that everything inside was in perfect order, and that the lights were even turned on. Moreover, water was running from the tap, which meant everything was working and in good condition. The young man continued checking all the electrical appliances in the house. To his surprise, everything worked perfectly, and he could not understand why. Why had everything in the house been working and remained in perfect condition for such a long period of time? Moreover, the greatest surprise was that both water and electricity were still functioning. Suddenly, the man realized what mistake he had made at that moment and immediately turned off the lights. Pulling out a weapon, he prepared himself and hid, expecting that he could be attacked at any moment. The perfect cleanliness of the house meant only one thing. Someone had been living there the entire time. However, he could not understand who might have been hiding in the house or how an uninvited guest could have gotten inside. Suddenly, he heard a suspicious noise outside. Paying attention to it, he realized that it could have been the people who had lived in his grandmother's house for the past 3 years returning. Therefore, tucking the weapon behind his belt, he decided to check who those people were and what the noise outside was about. Calmly, he headed toward the gate, hoping to drive away the strangers, yet still preparing for the worst and remaining alert. Outside, a whole crowd of men had gathered, their appearance showing that they were determined. Suddenly, the locked gates opened. The hero stepped out to meet them, the true heir and descendant of the deceased woman. Standing before him was the village chief, No Seok Dae, who wished to speak with the hero and find out who he was and what he was doing in the house. He also asked whether the young man was truly the woman's grandson, since the gates had been locked and it was strange that he had managed to enter. However, the hero did not respond and only stared silently at the strangers' faces. He did not understand what they wanted to achieve with their visit, as he had no intention of leaving the house or explaining anything to them. Suddenly, one of the visitors began shouting, offended that the young man dared to ignore the village chief and refused to answer his questions. Immediately, however, the chief intervened and calmed both sides. He assured them that the purpose of the visit was merely to talk and that they had no ill intentions. He was only interested in how the young man had gotten inside the house and what his true purpose was. However, the hero had no intention of answering. Instead, he began asking many questions himself. In this way, he tried to divert suspicion away from himself. But he did not realize that this only irritated the men even more. Moreover, he kept repeating that he truly was the deceased woman's grandson. At that moment, one of the villagers grabbed him by the neck and accused him of disrespecting the village elder. He disliked the young man's behavior and the disrespectful way he spoke. In response, he received only a smile from the hero. It became clear that this did not frighten him at all, and the elder was shocked by such audacity. The hero continued laughing, paying no attention to the enraged crowd in front of him. Suddenly, his attacker prepared to strike. However, the young man managed to act first, and to stop him, struck back with his head. This forced the attacker to scream in pain. His nose was broken and his head throbbed terribly. Moreover, the young man accused the man of rudeness, and his actions could be considered self-defense. The young man also realized one important thing. Despite the fact that their companion had been hurt, none of them reacted or even tried to defend or help him. He was convinced that the reason lay with the elder himself, as everyone seemed to be waiting for his command or simply feared him. The elder addressed a man named Hyun Seop and asked how much longer he planned to lie on the ground. Strangely enough, he simply stood up and apologized to the elder. At that moment, the old man approached the hero, stopped in front of him, and examined him closely. He said that one of his men had acted improperly and essentially apologized on his behalf. He then let out a sly laugh, and at that moment his behavior seemed the strangest of all. Moreover, he continued to stare intently at the young man's face and did not stop smiling. He said that he had managed to get a good look at him and recognize him. After that, he ordered his men to return to the village, having convinced himself that the hero truly was the woman's grandson. After his words, everyone turned around without further questions and prepared to leave. However, the young man, who understood nothing and stood shocked by the gate, made them stop. He said that the house was in very good condition, giving the impression that someone had been living there. But the elder did not believe the young man's words, as his grandmother had left without saying goodbye to her family. Therefore, to prevent the house from falling into ruin, the villagers took turns helping and occasionally cleaning it. Once the young man understood everything, he was ready to let the chief and his men leave. But Hyun Seop could not calm down. He could not believe that the young man would simply be allowed to live in that house. To ease his subordinates' doubts, the chief made him look at the roof of the building where the hero was staying. What Hyun Seop saw there terrified him greatly. It was the spirit of some kind of monster. Moreover, the chief was very pleased, as the creature was dancing joyfully with great enthusiasm. Thus, the matter could be considered settled, and the men had no claims against the young man. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the same girl appeared, the daughter of the mad old man. However, the young man did not notice her, as he was thinking about what had happened the day before and about the people who had visited him. He then realized that he had left his pack of cigarettes inside. He was already about to turn back when he suddenly heard a familiar voice and saw the girl running toward him. She asked why the chief had come to see him, but instead of answering, he asked her about cigarettes, hoping she smoked as well. He also thought that the girl might have told the chief about what had happened, which was why they had come. But she tried in every way to deny her guilt and said that she had nothing to do with the visit. The hero did not get angry with her and tried to show kindness through his demeanor. However, the woman could not calm down and again asked the young man about the recent visit. This behavior seemed suspicious to the hero, and he explained that the men simply wanted to make sure he truly was who he claimed to be. Suddenly, the woman grew nervous and prepared to leave. The only thing she said was that the young man would soon regret it. After that, she silently walked away, leaving the hero alone with his thoughts. Yet it seemed he did not care and had no intention of stopping her. Therefore, after a while, she stopped on her own. Breathing heavily, she realized that she had not said everything and could not simply let the young man go. Knowing she risked never seeing him again, she called out once more and made him stop. She understood that the young man had arrived empty-handed and had no belongings with him. Therefore, she thought it would be appropriate to bring him at least a pillow. The young man did not seem opposed, so she rushed home, leaving him to wait. She did not know whether the hero would wait for her, but it was the only thing she could do for him. Meanwhile, the young man could not understand anything at all. He continued waiting for the girl, curious about what she truly wanted from him. After some time, he again heard a noise behind his gate. He understood that it was the girl who had already returned with a pillow for him. Meeting her, he saw disappointment on her face, as she thought he had not stayed to wait for her. At the same time, the girl brought him a pillow and a blanket, convinced that he had neither. The girl's behavior raised many questions for the hero, and he could not understand why she was doing this. It was especially strange since she had argued with him the day before. His words shocked the girl, and for a moment she stood silently, unable to say anything. Still, she apologized for her behavior and admitted that she had suspected him of lying. It seemed she simply felt sorry for him and wanted to make amends. She then handed her belongings to the young man, hoping he would accept them. In despair, the young man took the pillow and blanket. After that, the girl simply ran away without explaining anything. She quickly moved away from him, feeling immense shame over her recent behavior. Suddenly, however, she turned back and decided to look him in the eyes once more. To her surprise, she realized that the young man was still watching her leave and had remained standing in place. In truth, the hero was simply trying to make sense of what had happened. After some time, he entered his new home. Troubling thoughts tormented him, and he could not connect the events of the previous day. Thinking through different possible developments, he even began to feel nervous. He also thought about the girl, her visit, and her gift. Such kindness and behavior seemed strange to him. Suspicion also tormented him, so he decided to check the contents of the pillow and blanket. Immediately, he cut open the pillow, trying to find a hidden microphone or some other device. To his surprise, a very interesting object was indeed found inside, the origin of which he did not yet understand. Meanwhile, a new day dawned in the settlement. As usual, the protagonist was busy with his morning routine while listening to the news. Moreover, exercising was his mandatory and special ritual. He paid great attention to physical exercise and treated his health and physical condition very responsibly overall. That is why physical activity meant something much more to him than ordinary daily routine. After exercising, he took care of his skin and face, which also held great personal importance for him. He also could not forget the events that had happened to him the previous night and kept thinking about the mysterious note. The events then shifted to a chicken farm belonging to some household in the settlement. There were quite a lot of chickens. Therefore, someone had to constantly feed them and watch over them. It became clear that it was Hyunseop, and it was unclear why, but he was catching chickens from the cage. However, when he had already finished, he was noticed by a man who was most likely the owner of the chickens. Hyunseop explained his crime by saying that the elder needed a white chicken. But the owner did not like this, since even last time it was his chickens that were taken, and he could not understand what made his chickens so special. The man believed that chickens could be bought in the city and that there was no need to steal them, as it was illegal. However, Hyunseop glared at him angrily and accused him of disobeying the elder's order and daring to contradict his words. Although the man was frightened, he continued to stand his ground and believed that the chickens were his property and that he was not obliged to share them. Eventually, the thief lost his temper and began accusing the man and openly threatening him. He advised the old man to simply let him go and not cause trouble for anyone. Meanwhile, the hero's morning routine continued, and he decided to go for a run. He chose to run the remaining short distance at maximum speed. However, his strength quickly left him, and he realized that he could not go on. He used to be able to run much faster and longer, so he blamed smoking for his loss of endurance. In general, there was no need to talk about its harm. The guy understood it perfectly well himself, but nothing could be changed. Suddenly, he witnessed an argument between two men over a chicken. Hyunseop did not want to pay compensation for the animal as the man demanded, nor did he want to return it to its owner. Therefore, unable to tolerate the man's words, he simply struck him, almost killing the unfortunate animal in the process. The man remained lying on the ground in a pile of feathers. He was shocked and bitterly disappointed. At that moment, Hyunseop froze and could not move. After what had happened, he was completely speechless. The reason was that behind the man he saw the elder, who had accidentally witnessed everything and appeared out of nowhere. He was extremely furious, and it became clear that serious trouble awaited Hyunseop. The elder expressed his concern to the man, as he had been absent for a very long time. The man understood that he was in serious trouble and did not know how to explain what had happened. The elder began scolding Hyunseop, as he had failed to control himself and his actions could anger his mother. He also addressed the injured man named Seong-sik and asked how he was feeling. A worried Hyunseop did not know how he could make up for his guilt toward his mother or what to do to keep her from getting angry. The elder wanted to pay the man for the chicken and tried to find out its price. But Hyunseop insisted on his position. He was ready to do anything and tried to seek advice from the elder. However, the elder believed that a person who committed a crime must bear responsibility themselves, so he could not decide or determine the punishment. At that moment, the hero witnessed a rather strange scene that amused him. He noticed that Hyun-seop had started beating himself. He begged his mother not to be angry, saying that he had already begun punishing himself and would continue until her anger passed. The blows continued, and Seong-sik watched what was happening in astonishment. But at that moment, he was about to leave. The boy, who had been enjoying the beautiful day and had witnessed the unusual event, heard footsteps behind him. It was the same girl, and seizing the moment, he asked since when the village had become so entertaining. From her answer, it became clear that it had not always been like that. She was convinced that they did not need to watch what was happening, and that it would be better to go to a safer and quieter place. The boy did not understand what she was plotting again, and did not hurry to get up and follow her this time. However, she did not understand why he was hesitating and not listening to her. When suddenly she heard a question about yesterday's events and what had actually happened. After all, it seemed strange to him that the woman was so interested in him and constantly tried to find him. It also became known that she was glad when she heard that the boy would stay in their settlement for a long time. It was precisely his decision to stay and live in the settlement that made her act this way. But the boy interrupted her and reached into his pocket. He took out the object the girl had placed in his pillow and held it right in front of her face. Seeing this, the girl was very surprised and blushed, as she had not expected that the boy would be able to find the item. She explained that she was simply testing him, as it was hard for her to trust a stranger. However, the object did not resemble a microphone or a listening device. Rather, it looked like some kind of talisman or charm. Unable to hold back, the boy asked again why the girl had slipped that object to him. At that moment, the girl began to sweat, realizing that her answer might not please him. Moreover, she worried that he might simply not believe her, as the truth sounded like nonsense. Still, the girl dared to say that it was a talisman that protected against ghosts, which supposedly infested the entire settlement. Taking it in both hands and holding it out toward the girl, the boy asked whether she had brought it into the house because she truly feared ghosts. Without waiting for an answer, he simply tore it apart right before her eyes. Unable to endure it, she began screaming at him, as she could not understand his motives, especially why he had destroyed the object. The man explained that the reason was that he did not believe in such shamanistic tricks, and that ghosts did not exist at all. Thanking the girl for her concern, he was about to leave. He simply crumpled her protective charm. He also intended to throw it away, since a torn talisman could not be effective. At that moment, the ruined object fell to the ground. Saying goodbye to the woman, he promised to tell her if he ever saw a ghost with his own eyes. However, deep down he believed that it would never happen, while the girl watched him leave and deeply regretted that she had sincerely wanted to help him. Night fell over the settlement. The same man, the farm owner, was busy with his own affairs in his yard. Seong-sik could not calm down after the chicken thief had struck him and received neither an answer nor any proper punishment. However, he shuddered when he saw the elder, and this thought greatly pleased Seong-sik. He continued sitting and pondering a plan of revenge and what punishment his opponent deserved. In his head, he replayed possible dialogues and grew angry at being looked down upon. Suddenly, he swung at a chicken that was simply walking past him. With one sharp movement, he managed to cut off the chicken's head and take its life. However, this did not make him feel any better, as he imagined Hyun-seop in place of the unfortunate animal. What he had done to the chicken seemed right to him at that moment. Moreover, he firmly decided to take revenge on Hyun-seop and set out to search for him. Seong-sik simply could not allow anyone to dare insult him. Rising to his feet, the man went in search of him. He knew the place where Hyun-seop lived or might be staying, and that was where he intended to check. Reaching his house, he began calling out his name, hoping to be heard and get a response. He was also smiling and looked very pleased, as he rejoiced at the thought of soon taking revenge on his offender. The man added that he had come to collect money for the chicken that someone had tried to take from him. Thus, he intended to enter the yard and had already begun opening the door. He looked extremely focused, and without the slightest hesitation, was ready to slaughter his victim. With all his strength, he yanked the handle and pulled the door toward himself. At that time, Hyun-seop, who had heard a strange noise behind the fence, decided to check what was really happening. His surprise knew no bounds when, in the middle of the night, he saw the same old man in his own yard. Moreover, he was armed and determined, with no intention of negotiating. Seong-sik did not stop laughing and looked terrifying. However, Hyun-seop could not understand what Seong-sik wanted from him and did not expect that he might actually attack him. He also knew that after such an act, Seong-sik could be severely punished, as it would greatly anger his mother. Nevertheless, it became clear that the old man was not thinking about that, as revenge and retribution came first for him. He was convinced that his offender deserved to get what he was due, and that the punishment Hyun-seop had given himself was not enough. Suddenly, he attacked Hyun-seop and intended to inflict serious injuries on him. The man could not believe his own eyes, as he was not prepared for such a turn of events. He had to act decisively as he risked receiving fatal injuries, so he managed to dodge in time. Next, he tried to grab the old man by the arm and knock the knife out of his hand. However, the old man did not give up and kept trying to stab his opponent and seriously injure him. He was firmly determined to kill him and take revenge for what had been done to him. When the man failed to disarm the attacker, he tried to throw him to the ground and tripped him. Seong-sik began to lose his balance, while the man pressed down on him with the weight of his own body. Eventually, the knife slipped from his hand and lay on the ground nearby. The confrontation between the two men turned into a real fight. Hyun-seop, who had previously treated the old man well, was convinced that his attitude had changed forever, as the man had dared to swing a knife and tried to kill him. Therefore, he began striking the man in the nose and face, trying to cause as much damage as possible. He also believed that the man was mentally unstable and going through extremely difficult times. He was incredibly angry and continued beating the old man with all his strength. Moreover, he paid no attention to the fact that his opponent was much older, weaker, and unable to resist. The events then shifted to the protagonist's home. The next morning, as usual, he prepared to go for a walk and began warming up. Suddenly, he saw the same girl by his gate, already sitting there and waiting for him. Seeing her, he was shocked, as he had not expected her appearance after everything that had happened. He asked the girl about the purpose of her visit. From her words, it became clear that a gathering was being held in the settlement specifically because of the boy's arrival. The boy did not understand what terrible thing he could have done or whether it was really that important. Still confused, he suddenly felt the girl grab his hand and begin pulling him along. She said that they had very little time and that the meeting had already started. She also said that they absolutely had to be present and that everyone had been waiting for them for a long time. Therefore, at that very moment, they headed toward the meeting place. The place was a large building resembling a school, capable of accommodating many people. However, before entering, the girl stopped. She told the boy that he needed to agree with everything and not behave suspiciously. After that, they were ready to go inside and become participants in the gathering. In front of them, they saw the village elder and his followers, who fell silent upon noticing the protagonist. It was clear that they had been waiting for them for a long time and sighed with relief when they finally arrived. The hero asked the girl who the elder really was, since he behaved like a king, and it was strange that all the men in the settlement obeyed him. The boy also accused the elder of disrupting his daily routine, as he had to spend his own time and attend the meeting. At that moment, the elder lit a cigarette and apologized to the hero. His behavior caused concern among his followers. However, the elder himself ignored their judgment and silently continued smoking. Suddenly, he asked what role the boy intended to play in their settlement. But the hero did not understand a word and did not know how to behave. The elder continued speaking and offered him to join their group aimed at preventing crimes that might occur in the village. However, the hero did not like this initiative and immediately refused. This caused disapproval to appear on the faces of the men. All the men immediately looked at him with visible anger, as his behavior seemed overly arrogant. The girl was also shocked by his behavior, and by the fact that he could simply refuse without obeying the elder. The boy said that he had come to the settlement to live peacefully, then turned around and prepared to leave. Accusations were immediately directed at the elder, as he did not even attempt to stop him. The men were angry at the boy for refusing to obey them and believed that he had no right to continue living in their settlement. However, the elder began calming them down. After his words, the nervous and worried men looked at him, waiting to see what would happen next. The elder decided to leave the boy to his mother, as he himself did not know what could be done with him. The elder also noticed that Seong-sik was absent from the gathering and asked Hyun-seop why he was not present. The man did not respond and became even more nervous. However, realizing he could not remain silent, he explained that they had fought the previous night. To his surprise, the elder replied that he had done a good deed, as he had saved the man in that way. After that, all the men and the elder sat in silence. Eventually, the gathering could be considered over, as the elder wished to remain alone to pray. However, everyone noticed that the girl had not returned to the gathering and had not participated in the discussion. In fact, she was trying to catch up with the hero and persuade him to return. But the boy did not stop and had no desire to speak with her. Still, she managed to catch up to him and said that it was already noon. She also asked his name, as she did not know how to address him. He replied that his name was Heo Mayong. Upon hearing this, the girl smiled. Immediately afterward, she began shouting at the boy and accusing him of leaving the gathering so easily, despite her warning him to agree with everything. However, the boy did not understand the importance of her words, as he was convinced that he did not have to help others and intended to live only for himself. He also fell silent and was about to light a cigarette. But the girl was convinced that living comfortably was possible in only one way, namely, by not contradicting the elder's words and by listening to him, as otherwise there could be terrible consequences. But the hero did not care about her words. He did not hear her and did not believe a single word she said. To him, it was nonsense, just like her stories about spirits. Meanwhile, the event shifted to the elder's house, where he was praying. On the table next to statues and icons sat a living chicken. It seemed that he was performing some secret ritual or even engaging in a sacrifice. His prayer was something terrifying. His gaze and movements were so mysterious that they made one's blood run cold. It seemed that everything would soon be over for the chicken, as it was destined to become a victim of the strange ritual. After some time, everything ended, and the man killed the chicken. The entire room and the statues were covered in blood. However, the ritual did not end there, and something even more horrifying followed. The elder smeared his body and eyes with the blood of the dead animal. While doing so, he thanked and praised the mother for salvation. Meanwhile, an unknown car was driving along the night highway. Behind the wheel sat a man who looked extremely exhausted, having had a very difficult day. Behind him, in the passenger seat, sat his son, who dreamed of becoming a police officer just like his father. However, the man assured him that his job was very difficult and dangerous, so his son should consider a different future profession. Nevertheless, the boy wanted more than anything to protect his mother and father, which is why he truly dreamed of such a job. He was determined to punish anyone who dared disturb his family. The father told the boy about an anonymous police officer who could easily deal with any villains and who had the authority to decide people's punishments. Moreover, by choosing this profession, the boy committed himself to studying hard and earning good grades at a law school. Suddenly, a woman anxiously addressed the man. Ahead, she noticed a vehicle trying to reverse out onto the road. The driver of the truck might not have noticed them and accelerated at that very moment. Suddenly and at high speed, he blocked the path of the car, creating a dangerous situation. The collision was unavoidable as the road was too narrow. Therefore, the man shouted for his family members to brace themselves for impact. She pulled her son close and shielded him with her own body. And then, the terrible collision occurred. As a result of the accident, the man's car was severely damaged, the glass shattered, and everyone inside suffered serious injuries. The car was also violently spun around and, by sheer luck, did not overturn and remained on the road. Moreover, it continued moving and spinning in the middle of the road. Eventually, it came to a stop after crashing into a sturdy fence. After some time, those responsible for the terrible accident began approaching the car to see whether there were any survivors inside. Fortunately, the child was not harmed, as the woman shielded him with her own body and thus saved his life. He tried to shout to his parents, who, on the contrary, had suffered serious injuries and were unconscious. The people responsible for the accident tried to bring the father back to consciousness, so they began slapping and shaking him. When the man regained consciousness, the question arose of what to do next. The unknown people were also behaving very strangely. Because of the darkness outside, it was hard to make out their faces. But it was clear that they were smiling and staring at the woman with the child. From their words, it became clear that they wanted to kill the woman, but could not decide what to do with the child. Not wanting to deal with the woman, one of the strangers pressed a shovel to her neck and was about to kill her. He intended to do it quickly, and even the fact that the boy saw everything did not stop him. He wished only for the woman to be sent to heaven. Suddenly, Haeomyong woke up. It was his nightmare again. Meanwhile, the events shifted to Seong-sik's home. His wife had prepared chicken broth for breakfast and wanted to treat her husband to it. However, she witnessed that her husband was already drunk and started a scandal because of it. She was dissatisfied with the old man's behavior. And moreover, he did not react to her words at all. She was disturbed by the fact that he had started drinking again and had left the house at night with a knife. She also accused him of carelessness and irresponsibility toward his own life, as she was convinced that sooner or later he could be killed. Suddenly, the enraged man looked at the woman. It became clear that he could no longer tolerate her words. But she continued and accused him of constant conflicts with Hyun Seop. Suddenly, the man cut her off. He overturned the food she had prepared and began smashing everything in his path. The woman could not understand such a reaction, as it was known that Hyun Seop had previously protected him from his mother's anger. However, Seong-sik himself was convinced that his offender had to be punished for his actions. He also did not want to give away his chickens anymore, and the village head, knowing what had happened, did not intervene or resolve the problem. Unable to bear it any longer, the man decided to leave the house hungry. And the woman, extremely nervous, began apologizing to her mother for her own behavior and for Seong-sik's behavior. Meanwhile, the man managed to find a better place where he could be alone and think everything through. He continued drinking. Downing bottle after bottle of alcohol, Seong-sik kept sitting alone on a bench in the park. He was furious with everyone involved in his misery and intended to kill them all. Suddenly, he heard a very familiar voice. It was Ja-eun, who happened to be walking through the park and met him. Immediately, she held out her basket to him and wanted to treat him. They were peaches, which as she thought were fresh and very tasty, and she offered him some since the man had no food to go with his drink. But Seong-sik asked where she was going, since it was not the road to her home. At that moment, she told him about a newcomer who had recently settled in their village and lived alone, so she wanted to bring him some food. The man continued drinking and stared intently at the girl's face. Suddenly, he did not like the expression with which she was looking at him, and he became very angry. But that was not the case. The girl was frightened and thought that he had simply drunk too much. He also accused her of planning to give the peaches to a person who had lived in the village for less than a week. Suddenly, he grabbed a knife and was about to injure the girl, as he was convinced that she was also trying to anger him. The girl, shocked by such behavior, jumped to her feet and tried to calm the man down. Her voice sounded uncertain as she watched the man begin to approach her. Therefore, in order not to get into a dangerous situation, she picked up the food and was about to leave. However, suddenly, the man struck her with the knife and wounded her arm. Ja-eun dropped the basket of fruit and did not understand the reason for such behavior. But the man believed that the girl was simply ignoring him because of the unknown boy. He thought that since the newcomer's arrival, everything in the village had become very strange. Suddenly, the man began shouting, blaming the hero for all the troubles. He considered it his duty to get rid of him and save the entire village. Hearing this, Ja-eun became terribly frightened, as she did not understand what might happen next. Suddenly, the madman lunged at her. Grabbing her by the hair, he tried to catch and stop her. But somehow the girl managed to break free. Only a torn clump of her hair remained in Seong-sik's hand. He promised that he would pursue her constantly and was not going to let this go so easily. The girl desperately began to run, trying to get away from the man. However, he did not fall behind and continued to chase her. He kept smiling and shouting at the girl, demanding that she stop and surrender to him. Fortunately, he was old and did not have enough strength to catch up with her. Nevertheless, he did not stop, and the girl realized that he had lost his mind and was ready to kill her. Therefore, in order to save her life, she ran toward Hae-myung's house. She hoped that the boy would be home and would open the door for her. Immediately, she began knocking and screaming frantically, hoping that he would protect her. However, no one opened the door, and she watched in horror as the deranged man approached her. It was obvious that the girl had nowhere to run, and if Hae-myung had not come out, she would have been left face to face with a dangerous armed criminal. Seong-sik threatened that the girl would soon be sent to heaven. He paid no attention to her tears and pleas to leave her alone. And eventually he began to approach her. Ja-eun screamed hysterically and began to pray that the boy would hear her and save her. Suddenly, the deranged old man rushed after the girl, determined to kill her no matter what. He began shouting that she was irritating him and would soon die, like all the others who had become his enemies. The girl realized that she was doomed and no longer expected any help. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the hero appeared and struck the man with his foot, managing to stop him. The boy appeared at the last moment and miraculously managed to save the girl from certain death. She could not believe her own eyes, as the boy had become her savior. Seong-sik fell to the ground, feeling unbearable pain throughout his body. The hero, not understanding what was happening, asked why there was so much noise and why she had disturbed him. Then the girl said that she could have become a victim of a madman, as he had wounded her and was ready to stab her. Suddenly, the boy noticed the girl's cut. He saw that she was very frightened and was telling the truth, as blood was flowing from her deep wound. Hae-myung decided to examine the wound and help the injured girl. First, he wiped away the blood with his own towel. He did this very carefully so as not to cause harm or pain. Suddenly, he heard the madman's voice, and it seemed that the man recognized the boy and knew that he was the newcomer. Therefore, he decided to kill him as well and finally stop the madness that had engulfed the village after his arrival. Hearing this, the boy sighed heavily, realizing that he now had a new problem that needed to be dealt with. The man truly was insane, as he linked all the village's troubles to the hero's appearance. Moreover, the boy did not expect to see him in such a state early in the morning. The boy believed that the girl needed to go to the hospital to have the wound treated. Suddenly, the man fell silent and became extremely suspicious. He stood still, lowering his head and not moving. His eyes began to fill with blood, and he looked at the people before him with terrible hatred. Suddenly, blood began to flow from his eyes. Soon, he could no longer stand still and rushed straight at the hero and Ja-eun, swinging the knife. The hero, who was trying to stop the girl's bleeding, noticed the approaching danger. He tried to protect himself and the girl's life, realizing that he had to defend himself. Immediately, he tried to strike the man with the towel to throw him off balance. Moreover, he knew that the old man had a broken nose, which was his weak spot. so the blow to the nose worked and was the most effective. After that, the boy struck the man in the face. The kick was so strong that Seong-sik began to lose his balance. Very soon, he was on the ground again and could not get up for a long time. For a while, the hero managed to stop him and save himself. However, the old man did not give up and tried to come to his senses and get back on his feet. He was groaning loudly, and his face was badly battered and terribly swollen. However, when he finally managed to get up, the girl, with horror on her face, tried to warn the hero about it. Heo Mayong did not want to harm the old man, who was no match for him, but he had no other choice. He wanted to call for help and alert the other villagers about the situation, but it was already too late. The old man was preparing to attack again and stood silently, staring at them. It was very strange for Heo Mayong to witness such behavior, as he did not know whether it would ever end or what was going on in the sick old man's mind. Moreover, he could not understand where the old man was getting the strength to remain standing. Therefore, he decided to attack first and put an end to what had happened. Immediately, he began to approach his opponent quickly. After that, he struck him in the face with all his strength. It seemed that he was satisfied, as everything was going as it should. Next, he was going to strike the man using a special martial art technique. However, he realized that it could seriously harm the old man and worsen his health, so he simply hit him with a towel. Even so, the blow was quite strong, causing the man to lose his balance and, after being tripped, fall to the ground. Once again, the madman ended up on the ground with a broken nose and a swollen face. But he did not even think of giving up and tried to get up again. His attempt failed, as he had lost a great deal of strength, and blood from his eyes and nose was flooding his face. The main hero was very determined and did not want to let the old man go. He understood that the man could return and stab the girl or him in the middle of the night. He decided to take justice into his own hands and intended to strangle the helpless man. So throwing the towel around his neck, he began to squeeze with all his strength. But Seong-sik resisted and tried to break free. He even managed to scratch the boy's face. And the boy, enraged, tried to strangle the old man even harder. Eventually, Seong-sik's strength began to fade, his breathing became heavy, and his resistance weakened. The girl realized that the boy might kill him like this and tried to shout to stop him. But he did not stop and continued squeezing and choking the man. Eventually, he seemed satisfied and began to smile. Seong-sik lost consciousness from lack of air and stopped resisting. Ja-eun was very frightened, because despite everything Seong-sik had done, she did not wish him dead. Therefore, the hero released the man and stopped choking him, and his body fell to the ground. Finally, the boy could breathe calmly, as their confrontation could be considered over. When the man showed no reaction, the girl ran up to her savior. She was worried about his health and hoped that he was not injured. She also hoped that the old man was alive and that nothing would happen to him. However, Heo Mayong became angry with her, as he did not understand how everything had started or what had really happened. The frightened girl tried to explain how everything had occurred. The thing was that Seong-sik kept attacking even after he had lost consciousness. Moreover, he was aiming for the eyes even while being strangled. The main hero had never encountered anything like this before and could not understand how such a thing was possible. However, the girl realized with horror that the man might have been possessed by a spirit, but her version seemed like nonsense to the hero, despite the fact that the girl herself had witnessed what was happening. The girl tried to convince the boy of the existence of ghosts, showing him her injury. She also tried to explain that supernatural forces truly existed in the village, and that they were extremely dangerous for ordinary people. Meanwhile, blood from her wound was dripping onto the ground right beneath her feet. She did not stop talking and said that there were an unusually large number of ghosts. Suddenly, something truly inexplicable began to happen with the pool of blood in front of her. Her head started spinning sharply, and she almost lost consciousness. Then she felt an overwhelming wave of weakness, and a sudden gust of air from beneath her feet caused her hair to whip helplessly through the air. She also sensed something indescribable, as if some force had begun to pull her along. Moreover, she noticed something strange located directly behind her, and so she ran in that direction, trying to find out what was really happening. The boy could not understand anything and was shocked by what was happening. He even began to get angry at her because of her behavior. Besides not believing a single word about ghosts, he did not understand what strange things were happening in the village. He was no longer sure that he was sane and felt that everything that had happened recently put him at risk of losing his mind completely. Overwhelmed by heavy thoughts, he also felt a sharp pain in his head and ringing in his ears, and in order not to fall, he had to hold on to the fence. He wanted only to be left alone and not bothered anymore. When the girl stopped at the place where the unknown force had led her, she saw nothing. But in order to make sure that something mystical had indeed occurred, she began digging the ground beneath her. The boy, who witnessed her strange behavior, became extremely nervous and even frightened. However, the girl did not listen to him and continued digging. She felt that she was supposed to find something and that her vision was not meaningless. Eventually, when the hole was deep enough, she began to feel some object beneath her fingers. Looking inside, she was shocked and truly terrified. What she found could forever change her life and the lives of those who lived in the village. Suddenly, she came to her senses and realized that she remembered nothing. She was also shocked by what she had done. The girl was convinced that she had done nothing, yet the mud on her hands and the boy's words suggested otherwise. She truly could not understand how she had managed to do it, especially to find such a mysterious object. The object she had found was part of an Azazel ritual that had been performed since ancient times. However, the hero could not understand how a jug wrapped in a strange ribbon could have ended up on his property. Moreover, he had no idea what such a strange discovery could mean. But the girl explained that the jug was meant for a curse, and she could not understand how it had appeared in the boy's house. Therefore, in order to get rid of the evil energy that might have been inside the pot, she intended to burn it. Suddenly, the angry boy approached the girl. He had many questions and did not want to waste time on things he did not understand, so he struck the pot with all his strength. Ja-eun could not withstand the strong blow and dropped the pot. It shattered as it was fragile, and Ja-eun, shocked by the boy's audacious behavior, began to shout at him. However, realizing the seriousness of the problem, she nearly burst into tears. The hero, on the other hand, remained calm and did not attach any importance to what had happened. Inside, he saw raw rice and a severed chicken head. The girl began screaming, because now they no longer had the opportunity to burn the pot and all its contents. Moreover, she was angry at the boy for not understanding the seriousness of the problem and for not believing her words. In addition, he was about to leave in order to sort everything out and simply wanted to mind his own business. Suddenly, at the spot where the broken pot lay, the girl noticed a horrifying sight. A clump of evil energy began to rise from the jug. After that, a large mass of dark energy possessed the boy, and he, not understanding anything, did not even notice how it happened. However, he felt an unpleasant chill throughout his body. His head began to spin, and he could not understand what had truly happened. He only heard the girl scream and, turning toward her, asked what she wanted. She, in turn, did not understand how it had all begun or where the mass of dark energy had gone. After some time, the boy and the girl decided to return to the man who was still lying unconscious outside. However, they realized with horror that he was no longer there. He could be anywhere, so the girl believed they needed to warn all the villagers, but the boy thought otherwise and wanted someone to examine the girl's cut. He also asked how the girl had known about the buried jug in his garden, but she did not understand and denied everything. It seemed that the hero began to suspect her, especially since earlier she had placed a sacred talisman on him. The boy said that it had been very interesting to watch the events unfold, and did not even notice that someone had been watching him. The man felt that someone was planning to kill him and that he would soon die. Therefore, he decided to flee and leave the village in order to save his own life. Nevertheless, the people decided to hold another meeting to figure out what had really happened. The village head intended to listen to the victim and knew that the man had been brandishing a knife the day before. All the men who had gathered inside were going to express their opinions about what had happened. However, everyone unanimously claimed that Seong-sik could not have done such a thing and accused the girl and the hero of lying. Exchanging glances, Heo Mayong and Ja-eun realized that they were left alone with their problems. Moreover, they were accused of lying, which was deeply offensive and unacceptable. The boy decided to act decisively and tried to prove the man's involvement in what had happened the previous night.